welcome back. This is episode 3 of True North. In the last session, I ended with, that I said that ultimately our freedom comes from the law of God. And now we want to look at how and why. What I find with a lot of people is they pass things along like little sayings, but what is not passed along is the how and why. And that's what we want to do in this session here. So how and why our freedoms come from the law of God is what we're going to do in this session. For a country to be a free country, it would have to be designed that way, and all its citizens would have to abide by the design rules. That's really the topic we're going to be talking about. That. So why is that? Well, let's take a hockey analogy, for example. If the Soviets are going to come over here and play hockey with us, we have to play by their rules or they have to play by our rules. There have to be the same rules for the same game. And that's why in a country, everyone has to play by the same rules for the whole country to be free. For life to be rewarding and satisfying, somebody had to design the rules of life, and the ultimate authority is the one who designed the universe. That's, in essence, the position of the God of the Christian Bible. In Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, and I'm not quoting a lot of scripture in these sessions because, you see, our culture doesn't consider scripture to be an authority. So what I'd rather do is use common sense and reasoning as my authority. But occasionally, I need you to know that all my reasoning comes from the Word of God. Deuteronomy 30, verse 19 says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. So what God meant by that is life and death, cursing and blessing means that right choices within the boundaries of God's law bring good consequences, and wrong choices outside those boundaries bring bad consequences. For a nation like Canada, which has forgotten its Christian roots, I will quickly try to explain what God meant by life and death, blessing and cursing. And to do that, I will now have to introduce a factor that's really important to this session, the forgotten factor of design. So I'm going to be talking about governing dynamics and the design factor. Our Christian roots are founded on the Bible, and God intended the Bible to be every society's moral compass. Why is it a compass? Because it clearly defines right and wrong, good and bad. By it, men discover if they're heading in the right direction. The universe was designed by the Creator before it was even created. The design is so intricate, complex, detailed, and interrelated that it's taken science years to discover the design characteristics, or what is called governing dynamics. We have to cover this in 2 segments. First, we're going to talk about the physical universe, and then we're going to be talking about the social universe. The astronomer Robert Jastrow said this years ago, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. The physical design characteristics of the universe are known as the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, electricity, magnetism, gravity, mathematics, hydraulics, aerodynamics, etc. A law in physics actually quantifies and defines and describes a design characteristic of the physical universe. The laws of physics were not designed or invented by men. They were discovered. For instance, George Gamow, Albert Einstein, Faraday, Galileo, Niels Bohr. These were of different nationalities, and they made the discoveries in their country and in their language. But were their discoveries meant only for their culture? Of course not. They were universal discoveries. Newton discovered the law of gravity. I like this little thing. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. Because they are universal and interactive, they had to be active and in place everywhere from the start. The laws of the universe could not have evolved because they had to be fine-tuned to permit the delicate, vulnerable, and wonderful thing we call life. This fine-tuning concept is at the heart of what is called the anthropic principle. And it's something I want to stress. It took me, 30 years to discover the anthropic principle. It's one of the best kept secrets in the culture, so pay attention. In essence, the anthropic principle describes the fact that life requires a very, very narrow, very specific set of circumstances, a very special environment in which to survive. There's many interesting implications of the anthropic principle. For instance, example, if the present universe was designed to the degree of accuracy to permit life, could it not have been designed to sustain life indefinitely? That's a question that needs answering. Could our present condition of decay and death have been prevented by a better design? As a matter of fact, some of the latest news, for instance, there's a Dr. Jun Young, and you can read this for yourself on the slides. He wrote a book called The God Pill. Quote, I have the idea that aging is plastic, that it's encoded. If something is encoded, you can crack the code. If you can crack the code, you can hack the code. Later, he explained further that if we hack the code correctly, quote, thermodynamically, there should be no reason we can't deter entropy indefinitely. We can end aging forever. We're talking here about secular scientists, they're not even Christians, that say there's no reason in the world why people couldn't live forever. The reason is the way that they're designed, there is in every human being, there's a replicator gene. Now, we won't talk about it further here, but we'll talk about it later. The most amazing thing about the anthropic design principle is the degree of fine-tuning necessary for human life to exist in a universe of such massive and powerful thermonuclear, magnetic, and gravitational forces. This aspect raises the interesting question. If the designer could fine-tune the creation to permit life, why didn't he just design it so all living creatures would never die? The creator must have had a good reason for permitting the present circumstances. In other words, people decay, they grow old, they die. If God can create universes, couldn't he eradicate suffering and all those other things we'd like to avoid and create a life without all those negative consequences? I guess that issue is rarely raised, but I'm raising it here. Of course, if he can create a universe, he could keep us from dying. So why is there death at all? The Christian answer is this. The designer had a purpose for allowing death, a purpose so amazing he was willing to risk the universe to accomplish it. We'll talk about this a little later in depth. Here's a Christian's response to the situation, just to kind of sum up the situation. Dr. Hugh Ross said this, moreover, there is no need to be depressed about the future. God, the Creator, has promised us in the Bible that as soon as he completes the conquest of evil, he will replace this vast universe with one far more glorious, wonderful, and good than the one in which we presently reside. The Christian answer to the death problem is death is being allowed by God right now because he's after the conquest of evil, which we'll talk about in the future. God will give us another universe as soon as he completes the conquest of evil. Okay, that was we were talking about the physical universe. Now we're going to talk about the social universe. I know I'm motoring along here, but you can go into these slides afterwards. A factor which is rarely considered in the topic of divine design is how that the physical universe must obey the designer's laws. But the social universe should also obey the designer's law, but it has no such limitations. Fact is, we were created with freedom. The thing to remember about the physical universe is it has boundaries set by the Creator. If not for the boundaries, there'd be chaos. I could give 1,000 illustrations, but there isn't time. A creator who designed the universe would know a thing or two about civilization. If the Creator can so find the universe to accommodate both the chromosome and the black hole, he can certainly be counted on to provide civilizations the principles of an orderly, peaceful, productive, successful, and sustainable society. That's just common sense. So it was the Creator who gave us laws of community or civilization. Societies and civilizations, to be successful, must abide by a certain body of rules. And those rules are the rules the Creator has set from the beginning. Throughout history, civilizations have either deduced these laws by conscience, common sense, by observing others, or by trial and error, or they had them passed down from their parents and forefathers. Human history actually started with laws given to men by the Creator. God gave men the laws in the Garden of Eden, as a matter of fact. You may not agree with the idea of the Garden of Eden, but folks, it's in the Bible and it makes sense. Now, the next two slides show how this might have happened. There are three methods that men can find for the laws or the design laws for civilization. Number one, pass them along from the original source. In other words, if God revealed these laws of civilization to Adam and Eve, all they had to do is pass them along. Number two, they can also find the design laws for civilization by experimenting. They need to propose them, discover by trial and error if they are indeed universal. And you know what? They can discover that by searching through history. Or they can take the shortcut and confirm them by comparison to Revelation. What we're trying to say is the design laws for civilizations can be found in many different ways, but ultimately the easiest way to discover them is just simply they're in the Bible. If we would read the Bible, we'd know what those divine laws are. So I include a slide that is going to be a little difficult for you, so I better introduce it. It's called the Passing On God's Law slide. In the next slide, it's a motorized slide, and it leads people through the process of passing on God's law. And I'm just going to, maybe I'll click on it. Each keystroke, when you get on the slide, and you'll have to do it yourself a little at the end of these sessions, each keystroke has its own little explanation, but there's not time or space here to explain it. If you can come up with a better way to present the information, please send us a message, okay? Here's God's passing on God's law. What it does is it shows that each generation has had the opportunity and the ability to pass on God's law. Most generations haven't done it very effectively. The last time God's law was passed on was when Jesus Christ was on this earth. And that's all recorded in the New Testament. Now, even before the laws of Moses and the laws of design were in effect, God's laws given on Mount Sinai only confirmed which laws were divine. I mean, I'm covering a lot of ground really quickly, but if you look back, every civilization that's been successful has discovered that certain laws are always true. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, no lying, cheating, stealing, etc. Those are God's design laws. The law of Moses set the record straight when in 1450 BC, there was already laws in the world at that time. The laws of Moses set the record straight. It clearly marked the boundaries of what the Creator considers right and wrong. Only the designer and Creator can do this. Governments can't make laws. Neither can individuals. It's up to government to enforce them and individuals to obey them. To make the law is God's job. To enforce the law is government's job. To obey the law is man's job. One of the reasons we're having so much trouble in Canada is everybody's making up their own laws. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It's like hockey players all playing by different rules. It just simply doesn't work. Right and wrong, good and bad, is not factored in by intuition or preference. It's a matter of design. Get this down, because this is one of the major discoveries that we made during the process of this series. Any choice or action in harmony with the Creator's design is good, right, or true. Any choice or action contrary to the Creator's design is bad, wrong, or false. I'll say it again. The reason I'm saying it is because nowadays this matter of right and wrong seems to be a matter of morality. It doesn't even have to be a matter of morality. It can be a matter of design. Any choice or action in harmony with the Creator's design is good, right, or true. Any choice or action contrary to the Creator's design is bad, wrong, or false. If any generation of people should know that, it would be modern Canadians. You can't buy a car and not go by the designer's rules. You can't put sugar in the gas tank. You got to put the right kind of oil in the oil. You can't put water into the transmission. Everything is either right or wrong, good or bad, according to design rules. And it's one of the major discoveries we made during the process of doing True North. A study of human history reveals that it's almost as if a universal law code had been given at the beginning of human civilization and passed down from generation to generation. Why can we say this? Because even the most ancient civilizations had codes of law which encouraged good and discouraged evil. Successful societies have always written laws to promote good and discourage evil. That tells me something. There has to be a clearly marked boundary between good and evil. One example is and I can't go into detail here, but this is the Stele of Hammurabi. The law code that the Babylonians found is a matter of defining good and defining evil. When you compare the law codes of the ancient civilizations like Egyptian, Babylonian, Chinese, Greek, etc., you discover the similarities are striking. They are invariably attributed to a divine origin, and definitions of what is right and wrong are very similar. And the existence of the conscience is a basic assumption. Now, that's a problem we're having in modern Canada. People have decided there is no such thing as a conscience, but it simply isn't true. The design laws of civilization, if we pass them along, we'll discover that really the Ten Commandments are the basic design laws of civilization. There's a good argument for this. For instance, there were 2 million witnesses who saw the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. 2 million people on the same time period saw Moses come down from the mountain. Now, the Ten Commandments have been under scrutiny for 3,500 years, and they've been found to be proven to be the most fair, equitable, sensible, and effective laws in history. In fact, elements of the Ten Commandments can be found in every moral code on the planet. So it's safe to say that the Ten Commandments are the common denominator code of ethics for all of human civilization. But people will say, were these laws really meant for us? Weren't they just given for the Jews? They were only given for the Jews, supposedly? No, they were given to the Jews first, but they were meant for everybody. Just as the physical laws of the universe applied to all creation, the social laws of civilization were meant to apply to all mankind. What ought to seal this argument is the fact that Galileo, who discovered the earth was round, he was an Italian. Niels Bohr, who discovered quantum mechanics, was Danish. George Gamow, who postulated the Big Bang, was Russian. Ramanujan, the mathematics expert, was an East Indian. Albert Einstein, who discovered relativity, was a German Jew. Were their discoveries only meant for their particular nationality? Of course not. The discoveries were universal. The Ten Commandments were meant to be universal too. Take any of the Ten Commandments and you will see they definitely define right from wrong. The 10 are divided into 2 groups. The first few are the credentials of the giver, that they come from God. The second group, the general laws of civilized behavior. All the other laws in the Bible are specific applications of these general boundaries. They could go on indefinitely into greater detail or be reduced or simplified to general principles. And these were later reduced by Christ to 2 general guiding principles. Number 1, that God is sovereign, that he is the source of all law. And number 2, the golden rule. The law of civilization is the golden rule. Think about it. The golden rule also is known as the law of reciprocity. Jesus identified the golden rule in the Ten Commandments. In Matthew 22:35, the first verse was, "Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked Christ a question, tempting him and saying, 'Master, which is the great commandment in the law?' And Jesus said unto him, 'Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets.'" Jesus was giving the golden rule. Even the atheist Richard Dawkins endorses the golden rule. In a TV debate, Dawkins said this, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt make no graven image. Thou shalt keep the Sabbath holy." What on earth has that got anything to do with morals? So he was making fun of the golden rule being used. And later, Dawkins made this sarcastic remark. I think it's depressing that anybody should suggest that you actually need God in order to be moral. I would hope that our morals come from a better source than that, and that therefore they are genuinely moral rather than based on outmoded scripture or based on fear. Why not teach children the golden rule? Do as you would be done by. How would you like it if? What Dawkins doesn't know, he's quoting God. He's saying, well, you don't need God. Well, God is the one that gave us the golden rule. So obviously, Richard Dawkins doesn't know what he's talking about. By the way, on the bottom of that slide, I put some links to the actual interview with Dawkins, and you can see it for yourself. These links go directly to the websites. Dawkins' evaluation is flawed because although he affirms God's design, he refuses to give God credit. His endorsement of the golden rule is really good, but his dismissal of God is a mistake. One reason is this: the fact that the moral law, the golden rule, works confirms the validity of the Bible as our moral authority. And what Dawkins excludes is even more important. Dawkins excludes God's entire plan for the future and the afterlife. So here's what's happening to the atheists. They like to take God's moral law, the golden rule, and expound on it and brag about it, but they dismiss the afterlife, immortality, heaven, all the things that really count and that make life work. They dismiss it. How can they accept the golden rule and dismiss everything else? Not only does the Bible give the universal law of civilization, which are called the laws of life, but also the law of immortality, or the afterlife. All human hope, purpose, direction, and power is short-circuited without giving God credit, without giving the credit to God, because God intended so much more than just an earthly existence. And in Corinthians, he says, the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. God wanted more than just a law that provides us with the boundaries for society. God wanted to also add the real perks to society, immortality. For goodness sake, we've gotten rid of the immortality part because we don't like God's law. Now, even secularists deduce the golden rule from history and sociology. For instance, the mathematician John Nash discovered the golden rule in the film The Beautiful Mind. I included here because this is profound. You need to watch this little segment here from the film. Russell Crowe does an excellent job of playing John Nash, who wins a Nobel Prize for his discovery. Okay? The scene is there, the link is there. I wish I could play it right now, there isn't time. Have a look at it. It's profound. So even atheists tend to agree with the golden rule. And that's because the rule is the universal basis of all civilization. The golden rule has always been there for men to discover. As a matter of fact, it's been rediscovered over and over again throughout history, and it's proven by such men like Confucius, Aesop's fables, Mahatma Gandhi, the Buddha, and the Dalai Lama. Ideal human behavior orbits around the golden rule, which is really God's universal law of civilization. I'm going to include this slide. It shows all the various religions in the world. They all believe in the golden rule. You'll have to go back and see it for yourself. There isn't time to cover it in detail. The conclusion is, if even pagan societies have come to the same conclusion by trial and error, it stands to reason that the universe, and especially civilization, was designed to function by this law. And all choices and actions contrary to this law are destructive and counterproductive. That all the God-given 10 Commandments and their summary, the Golden Rule, are vital to the survival of a society. So what's so special about our Christian roots? Our Christian roots are founded on the Bible, and God intended the Bible to be every society's moral compass. And when we threw out the Bible, when we threw out the 10 Commandments, when we threw out God's rules, our society began to go in the wrong direction. Our next section, how did we get so turned around? Please join me, and don't discount this material until you had a really good look at it again. Okay? See you in the next session. Thank you.